June is traditionally wedding month around the world, and the same is true here in France. And one of the highlights of any French wedding is its incredible wedding cake made out of a pyramid of puffed pastries. Well, here to tell us a bit more about that today is Joanne Carter, the founder of True Foodies. Hi, Joanne.
Hi, Judy.
This
nice
is
to meet
incredible.
you.
I had something like that at my own wedding. What is it?
Fantastic.
Talk us through.
Well, this is a kind of mini version of the Croquembouche, which is the most popular French wedding cake, and it is spectacular. It's basically a mounted pyramid or cone made out of choux pastry puffs, which are filled with pastry cream.
Choux, of course, meaning cabbage in French, so like little cabbages.
Yeah. And then it's bound together with caramel. And then after that, it can be drizzled with chocolate sauce or surrounded by spun sugar. It's usually decorated with flowers or fruit or even sometimes macarons. So it's an amazing thing. And what's interesting about it is it's very popular in the UK and Italy as well, where it's known as croquembouche. But if you talk to a French person, they won't know what a croquembouche is.
I have never heard that term before.
Yeah, it's the English term, but it's a French word. So what happened is croquembouche did exist in 19th century French cookbooks, and it literally means something that crunches in your mouth. But for some reason, the term just never made it into the 20th century in French. So in France, this cake is known as a pièce montée, which is a mounted piece.
And we can also see their videos, some of those pièces montées that you have at almost every French wedding. Where did it come from? What's the story?
So it all started with the pâte à choux, or choux pastry, which is the base of many, many French desserts. And actually, pâte à choux was created by the court of Catherine de' Medici when she came to France to marry King Henry II in the 16th century. So she was Italian, and she brought a lot of Italian chefs with her. And one of them, by the name of Pantarelli, is credited for making the very first choux pastry puff. And amazingly, Catherine de' Medici is credited with bringing a lot of foodie things to France, including the introduction of the fork in dining, as well as products like lettuce, parsley, pasta, and even truffles. So she's sometimes called the foodie queen because of that.
We can, as you're speaking, we can see a profiterole, which is the chocolate version of this puff pastry. But tell us a bit more about how the pastry itself is made.
Mm-hmm. So choux pastry starts out by being a mix of salt, sugar, water, milk, and butter. And then that's all heated up until the butter dissolves really well. The next step is to add flour, stirring and cooking on and off the heat, as you'll see. And then the final step is to add in the eggs very gradually, continually stirring and adding more egg mixture in. And this may look rather simple as we see it on the screen, but in fact it's quite a difficult recipe to get right because you need to get the exactly correct texture for the choux pastry. It has to be a little bit elastic. And if you don't get the correct texture, then when you put your choux pastry puffs into the oven and bake them, they don't really puff. They stay kind of flat. So yeah, it's a little bit of a recipe that needs some practice to perfect it.
And once the puff pastries are made, then what happens to make this?
So then they are filled with pastry cream, which is another ingredient in many desserts in France. It's usually vanilla flavored, but you can vary the flavor as you like. And then the construction begins.
Tell us a bit more about the pastry cream. What's inside that?
Oh, the pastry cream is a standard cream that's used in almost every single not every single, but many, many recipes in French pastries. And it's a classic cream with ingredients vanilla, cream, butter, lots of butter, and vanilla and other flavors. It can be flavored differently. So.
All right, let's come back to the croquembouche. Mm-hmm. Who created it?
The croquembouche, so Antonin Carême, who was the kind of celebrity chef of his day, actually created and popularized the croquembouche in the 1700s. So he was a very interesting fellow. He actually studied architecture. And because of that, he was fascinated by creating structures out of pastry. And interestingly, at the time when he was around, the most popular cake that he had made was in the shape of a Turkish hat, the fez.
Well, and this is such an incredible structure. The big question, I know this was a question we had at our own wedding, is how do you cut that?
Yeah, not so simple, right? Actually, traditionally, the bride and groom would lop the top off with the groom's sword, and then
Have to have your sword, of course.
and then the pieces would be caught in a tablecloth held by the bridesmaids. But of course, nowadays people choose normally to use just a long knife, not a sword. And the way you are recommended to cut it is really to start with a horizontal cut about 4 pastry puffs down. On a larger one, 4 pastry puffs down works fine. And then start cutting vertically around the pastry puffs because you don't want to cut through them. And then 1 serving is 4 puffs.
Well, now that we know how to do it, we're going to have to dig into it. So I'm looking forward to doing that. Thank you so much, Joanne Carter, for coming in. Joanne, of course, the founder of True Foodies, talking to us about the Croquembouche. Now, if you want to learn how to make the choux pastry, profiteroles, or any of the other recipes that Joanne was mentioning, you can always check it out on their website, truefoodies.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you.